Welcome right back to The Explainer. You know, when the world feels like it's literally falling apart, when wars are raging and economies are completely collapsing, humanity has this deeply ingrained, almost desperate need to seek out certainty. Today, we're going to explore how times of extreme crisis drive us to search for answers in two vastly different directions. On one hand, the alluring mysteries of the supernatural, and on the other, the incredibly dangerous, destructive arms of authoritarianism. Here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We'll start with Answers in the Dark, move to The Blind Seer, weigh prophecy or coincidence, unpack the genesis of hatred, examine the machinery of death, and finally, reflect on mirrors of our history. Section 1. Answers in the Dark. To really wrap our heads around this dynamic, we have to look back at a fractured 20th century Europe. Imagine a place plagued by back-to-back world wars and absolute economic ruin. It brings up a huge central question. How far will humanity go for certainty? Think about it. When hyperinflation turns your money into worthless paper overnight and families are being torn apart, people are desperate for a sense of cosmic order. We just want to know that someone somewhere has the answers. Section 2. The Blind Seer. Let's start in 1912. A 12-year-old girl named Vangelia was caught in a massive, brutal tornado in the Balkans. She lost her sight in the storm, but locals claim she actually gained a completely new kind of vision. Fast forward to the 1940s. World War II is ravaging Bulgaria, and she's now known as Baba Vanga. She literally transformed from a poor, traumatized farm girl into this legendary oracle. It's wild. But even Tsar Boris III of Bulgaria secretly visited her, supposedly to learn the exact date of his own death. She kept making these prophecies right up until she passed away in 1996, and she left behind a highly debated warning for the year 2026, a date she called the Year of the Great Turning. Just think about the sheer, disturbing precision of her visions for a second. In 1952, she bluntly stated that Stalin would not see the next spring, predicting his death would happen in March. And what happens? On March 5th, 1953, Joseph Stalin dies of a cerebral hemorrhage. It's moments exactly like this that took her from being a local myth to a global phenomenon. And if we look at some of her other famous hits, they are pretty uncanny. Back in the 80s, she spoke of American brothers being attacked by iron birds, which many later interpreted as the tragic events of September 11th. In 1989, she reportedly claimed the 44th U.S. president would be a black man. Then, in 1996, she warned that Kursk would be underwater. At the time, people naturally thought she meant the Russian city of Kursk. But then, in August 2000, the Kursk nuclear submarine tragically sank. Historical alignments like these totally cemented her legacy. Section 3. Prophecy or coincidence? Now, believers will argue that her visions were symbolic and deeply intuitive. They'll tell you the lack of firm historical records is simply due to the poor technology and political barriers of her era. Skeptics, on the other hand, are quick to point out that many of these prophecies are what we call retroactive reconstructions, meaning they only became famous after the event actually happened. Plus, she had some major misses. Actually, she allegedly predicted World War III would leave Europe completely deserted by 2014. Obviously, that didn't happen. Her language is incredibly poetic, which honestly makes it pretty easy to adapt her words to almost any era or crisis. Yet, despite the skepticism, her warnings for 2026 still absolutely captivate people today. She warned of fire expanding in Eastern Europe. She talked about the ice sweeping, which so many people instantly link to our modern climate change crisis. And she mentioned machines asking a question humanity cannot answer, which directly echoes our current, very real anxieties about artificial intelligence. So whether it's true prophecy or just coincidence, these visions serve as a perfect mirror for our modern geopolitical and technological fears. Section 4. The Genesis of Hatred. Now, we have to make a very stark pivot. It's an uncomfortable question, absolutely, but it is essential for our understanding of history. While some sought comfort in the quiet prophecies of Baba Vanga, millions of others found their false certainty in the roaring hatred of a failed artist, Adolf Hitler. How does a society just trade reason for authoritarian scapegoating? Let's break it down. It's like a devastating chain reaction. In 1907, Hitler was rejected from the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. But instead of accepting his lack of talent, he absorbed Vienna's toxic anti-Semitic political culture. He watched politicians literally use hatred to get votes. By 1918, Germany's defeat in World War I deeply traumatized him, fueling his search for scapegoats. Then the Great Depression hit in 1929, leaving millions starved and unemployed. The masses were desperate for a lifeline.
By 1933, using hypnotic oratory and massive theatrical rallies, he was appointed chancellor. He offered them order, but the price for that order was blind obedience.
The core mechanism for his rise to power was something called the stab in the back myth. This was a completely baseless, dangerous conspiracy theory. It claimed that Germany's military didn't actually lose World War I on the battlefield, but was instead betrayed from within by Jews and communists. It provided a false, hateful certainty to a totally humiliated nation. It gave them a specific target to blame for their collective trauma. Section 5. The Machinery of Death. The Holocaust didn't just start with the camps. It started with a slow, methodical normalization of dehumanization. First, there was social prohibitions, banning Jewish people from public office, kicking them out of parks, stripping their basic rights. Second came physical exclusion, forcing people to wear the Star of David and relocating them into walled, starving ghettos. And then finally, the terrifying third step, systematic extermination.
The regime hid behind a cold, bureaucratic euphemism they called the final solution. But what it really meant was the industrial-scale genocide of the Jewish people, alongside Roma, communists, and people with disabilities. This was executed primarily across 6 extermination camps in occupied Poland. And here is the truly chilling part. This death machine wasn't just built by a dictator. It was meticulously designed and run by highly educated engineers, doctors, and government officials, who simply abandoned all human ethics.
At the entrance of Auschwitz hung this deeply twisted deception: work sets you free. The reality behind those gates was an absolute moral abyss. We're talking 14-hour workdays in freezing conditions, immediate selections for the gas chambers upon arrival, and the systematic discarding of millions of human lives. Section 6. Mirrors of our history. And the trauma certainly didn't just end when those camps were finally liberated. The Holocaust silenced the voices of over 11 million Yiddish speakers. It virtually erased a vibrant, thriving culture from the map. Millions of survivors were left languishing in displaced persons camps without a home or a country. A massive global crisis that eventually paved the way for the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. Those geopolitical and cultural fractures, we still feel them today. Which brings us to 2 of the most vital words in our modern vocabulary: never again. We hear it a lot, but this isn't just some museum slogan. It is an active moral commitment. The tragedy of the Holocaust happened in plain sight. It was fueled by the complicity of thousands and the quiet indifference of millions. Remembering our history is our duty, so we can recognize the early warning signs of hatred long before they ever become state policy again. So, we have to ask ourselves, are we prepared to face the future, or are we doomed to repeat the past? Whether we're looking anxiously toward an uncertain 2026 or watching the very real rise of modern geopolitical tensions, the future isn't entirely written yet. We've seen exactly how humanity can reach for mystical comfort in the dark or tragically fall into the abyss of manufactured hatred. The true challenge for all of us is whether, when the next major crisis arrives, we'll choose the path of indifference or the path of memory and responsibility. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.